Welcome back to Smoke and Mirrors. This is episode 2. I'm your host, Kayla Pincus. This is a series about what real, messy, complicated change work looks like, not just in Cleveland, but in modern America. You can follow me on Instagram at Lil Struggles. That's Lil Struggles with a Z. So, today, let's continue clearing away the smoke and dismantling the mirrors. If I'm going to be pulling back the veil on these systems for you, it's only fair that we start with me. No smoke, no mirrors. In the last 2 years that I have been embedded in police modernization efforts in Cleveland, I have been asked, who are you? Who do you work for? Who pays you? And if you're hearing me for the first time on the radio, you may not know the big secret. I am, drumroll please, white. The most bizarre question I get is, you're white. Why do you care so much about this? It's a question rooted in assumptions about who belongs where, and today we're breaking those assumptions wide open. About me, but also about the way we view civic engagement in our society. This episode is about my story and perspective, but it's also about something much bigger. The idea that every community member, regardless of background, has the right to be involved. As a Cleveland resident, I am a member of the largest and most important stakeholder group in this work, the community. That alone is enough reason to engage regardless of race, gender, class, or education level. But I also personally bring expertise in criminal justice, policy, and advocacy that informs my work as a radio host, an advocate, and a candidate for civic leadership. So, let's start with an easy one. I am an independent advocate, not paid by anyone involved in this work. I've spent the last 2 years working on the issues I'm sharing with you for free. I support myself through contracts as a sentencing expert, policy researcher, and messaging strategist. This question of who pays who is important in the world of politics. If you're skeptical, I invite you to take a look. I'm a rare breed, but you'll find that I've always been in my own pocket and no one else's. Now, let's talk about why, as a white person, I care so much about an issue that disproportionately affects Black people. This may be controversial, but I actually don't think anyone should be asked to explain why they're civically engaged. The status quo has most of us scrolling on our phones during the few moments we get to ourselves. But imagine if that same status quo had us packing out community police commission meetings, or showing up at consent decree hearings. The real question wouldn't be, why are you involved? It would be, why aren't you? But for me, my commitment to this work is deeply personal, shaped by my Jewish faith and the principle of tikkun olam, repairing the world. Rabbi Tarfon's teaching, it is not your responsibility to finish the work, but you are not free to desist from it either, reminds me that, while I cannot solve every problem, I am compelled from my core to create a more just and equitable world. A central influence in my life was Mary, who helped raise me from the time I was 3 months old. Mary was a Black woman born in rural Georgia in 1934. She began working in the fields at age 6 and spent her life navigating systemic racial inequities. Her experiences taught me how deeply injustice is woven into the fabric of our society. During her final years, I cared for her, just as she cared for me during my upbringing. That bond instilled in me an unshakable commitment to ensuring dignity for everyone in our community. The work I do is about taking the love she gave me and carrying it forward, honoring the quiet power of her life. As a white person who's spent half my life working in the legal system and a lifetime in Black spaces, I'm often the closest, if not the only white face around. Sometimes that means my face gets metaphorically punched. There's an enormous amount of injustice in our society, and righteous anger about that injustice doesn't always have a clear outlet, even when I'm in the room trying to improve the situation. I'm not excusing that behavior. Mary would never let me. I'm nobody's doormat, and I'll never stand by while someone else gets treated like a doormat. I think these outbursts are a waste of everyone's time and resources. But I've come to understand them, and I roll with the punches, with my compass pointing always toward our collective goal of safety. And here's what I've learned through my own work. No one is coming to save us. We can't wait for some pre-existing movement or the leadership of those who choose to exclude others, whether you're a government entity, an association, or an activist group, to step up and do what needs to be done. If you're not inclusive, we're leaving you in the dust. And let's be honest, we're all tired of these false choices. If you're black, you have to be against the police. If you're white, you have to be pro-police. If you support police reform, you must be anti-police. These tired, played-out narratives only serve to uphold the status quo and keep us divided. We need to transform community engagement in political spaces into something that feels like home, a place where people are genuinely welcomed and valued. But let's be real. Right now, it's more like the Thunderdome. Showing up in spaces where politics are involved means risking abuse, harassment, or ostracism, even from people who would agree with you if the message came from someone who looked different. And as a woman, I have to fight tooth and nail to be heard beyond my figure, even and sometimes especially by other women. I've come close to walking away from this work more times than I can count, and sometimes I actually have. There have been moments when people have told me, "They don't deserve you," referring to commissioners, staff, politicians, government officials, or other activists. But my question is, who are they? This is our commission, our government. Those of us who work on behalf of our community aren't doing this for them. We do it selfishly, with pride, for the betterment of our shared home and everyone who lives in it. If well-intentioned, skilled, and sensitive people walk away because this space is too cruel, we leave it to the ill-intentioned, unskilled, and intolerant people who thrive in hostile environments. Not by accident, but because they're built for it. And that's not a future I'm willing to accept. So, I stay, at least for now. Because if enough decent people stick around, we can create a landing strip for others like us. Together, we can drown out the voices of those who seek to disempower us. That's why, back in August, I applied to be one of the 13 members of the Community Police Commission. Despite my qualifications and experience, I wasn't even granted an interview. My application for Inspector General wasn't legally reviewed either. To this day, the selection criteria remain a mystery. Meanwhile, those interviewed include a former police officer who resigned after being accused of beating and strangling his mistress, also his subordinate, before later being promoted and charged with a felony, pleading guilty to misusing police information. Another with a detailed rape allegation. Others were so unfamiliar with Cleveland policing that the mayor's selection committee had to explain it to them in the interview, and they went on to be nominated. Yet the mayor has repeatedly stated that he's looking for Cleveland's best and brightest to serve on this commission. So what is this if not smoke and mirrors? Anyone can and should be involved in shaping our city's future, but leadership, like serving on the CPC, requires preparation and commitment. Those at the table must be ready to deliver. If you've tuned in over these last 2 years, you've seen what happens when people who aren't equipped for the responsibility are given this power. Choosing commissioners isn't done from drawing a random name out of a hat. If you're going to hold a leadership position shaping public safety, doing your homework isn't optional. It's the bare minimum. And yet, for this CPC selection committee, it seems like having done your homework is treated as a disqualifier. So, what kind of background truly qualifies someone as the best and brightest for this critical work? My own experience offers a different perspective. In high school, my friend was convicted of a murder in a racially motivated prosecution riddled with police misconduct. I attended the entire trial, and it changed my understanding of justice, of who gets to be us and who is cast as them. It's a case that shaped my career in criminal justice, and now 15 years later, I'm working on his parole case. From there, I worked on wrongful conviction cases in New York City, mitigation investigations for Arkansas's death row, and parole cases in Ohio for children sentenced to life in prison many decades ago. I studied the social psychology of polarizing criminal justice issues during my master's in England. I came back home, and for the past 2 years, I've poured myself into improving policing in Cleveland. In my work as a community member with the CPC, I have fostered dialogue and mediated conflicts between commissioners, community members, police officials, and external experts. I have supported staff and commissioners in navigating challenges and drafting policy, often behind the scenes, while keeping the commission focused on its goals. From policy work to public engagement, I've been here, in the trenches, because I believe this moment is too important to sit out. All of this begs the question, what are the criteria to have a voice that drives real change in this city? A criminal history? Total ignorance and naivete? We talked about that Ferrari last week. This feels like we're in the process of handing over the keys to a crash dummy instead of someone who knows how to drive. Perhaps another day we'll unpack what's happening with the commission nominations as we speak. It's an urgent story worth telling. But let's not add any smoke and mirrors to how I feel about all this. I like to be upfront. I'm upset, I'm angry, disappointed, and experiencing what's often called moral injury, a deep betrayal of conscience by a failing institution. In just the past 2 years of this work, I've been slandered, taken advantage of, lied to, manipulated, undervalued, offered corrupt money, and even physically harmed. I've been told both implicitly and explicitly, this isn't for you. But we wouldn't be doing this work if everything were already sunshine and rainbows. One of my strongest traits is my ability to sit with those feelings while staying focused on what matters most. So, with that being said, let's talk about how anyone can have a seat at the table. And about that Ferrari we've built. We've already seen what it can do. One of the most transformative examples of the Community Police Commission's authority and action is the creation of a new discipline policy for the Cleveland Division of Police, a policy I co-authored as an ordinary civilian. This isn't just a tweak to the old system, it's a complete rethinking of how discipline works within law enforcement. Let me be clear. You don't need my background or credentials to be involved or make a difference with the CPC. Clevelanders, Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, police, janitor, GED, PhD, whatever, come as you are. This discipline policy is an example of what happens when we combine community engagement with experience and expertise. It's proof that civilians, without formal authority, can co-author transformative policies when we're given the space to contribute through the CPC. For years, discipline in the Cleveland Division of Police embodied the concept of smoke and mirrors. It was inconsistent, it showed favoritism, and it moved at a snail's pace. The so-called corrective action guidance wasn't about accountability. It was about power. Leaders used it to protect friends, punish enemies, and distort reality. When cases went to arbitration, the results were often overturned. That left officers frustrated, unions overburdened, and the community disillusioned. With the new discipline policy, the smoke and mirrors are gone. It's not just guidance anymore. It's a binding framework. It eliminates the kind of discretion that's been abused for years and replaces it with fairness and clarity. At the heart of this new system is the discipline matrix. It's a transparent tool that maps violations to specific, predictable consequences. No one is above the rules, not rookie officers, not the chief of police. And for the most severe offenses, termination is mandatory. No loopholes, no exceptions. It's a clear statement. Misconduct at this level won't be tolerated. This policy wasn't created in a vacuum. It reflects input from a wide range of voices: law enforcement labor representatives, civil rights advocates, HR professionals, mental health experts, and, crucially, those directly impacted by police misconduct. This collaborative process ensured that the policy balances the needs of officers, unions, and the community. It's a system that builds trust, not just among those enforcing it, but with the people it's meant to protect. Another important innovation is the Fairness and Consistency Committee. This group of rank-and-file officers reviews disciplinary actions in real time to ensure they follow the matrix. But this committee is about more than catching mistakes. It's about building a culture of accountability from within. It empowers officers to have a direct role in maintaining fairness while reinforcing the matrix's authority. Even the highest-ranking officials, like the chief of police or safety director, aren't above the rules. If they try to sidestep the matrix, it's a violation of a Community Police Commission mandate, and they can lose their job. This kind of safeguard is what keeps the system honest. Another key change is how we handle lower-level violations. Officers now have the option to skip a hearing altogether if they choose. They can simply accept the discipline and move on. For years, officers have said that the drawn-out hearing process was one of the most stressful parts of discipline. Having cases hang over their heads for months or even years created constant frustration. This change gives them back some control and reduces unnecessary delays. Unions benefit from this too. By cutting down on the number of hearings, the process saves time and resources, making it less of a burden for everyone involved. And let's talk about the cost of the old system. Delays in arbitration were more than just a logistical headache. They were a financial burden. The city frequently failed to pay its share of arbitration bills on time, leaving unions to cover both sides. This new policy eliminates much of that unnecessary strain, creating a clearer and more equal process for resolving disputes. For the community, this discipline policy offers something even more profound: transparency and accountability. People want to know that when misconduct happens, there's a system in place to address it, fairly, consistently, and without favoritism. This policy delivers that. It's a tangible example of how trust can be rebuilt, not through rhetoric, but through action. As a co-author of this policy and the daughter of a union lawyer, I can tell you this: it's not just about rules. It's about creating a system that works for officers, for unions, and for the public. It's about ensuring that everyone knows what accountability looks like and that it applies equally to everyone. This policy proves that change isn't just possible, it is happening. Of course, the work isn't done. A policy is only as good as its implementation. That's the challenge before us. We've built something incredible, but it's up to all of us, collectively, to keep it running. It's not just about having the tools, it's about owning the responsibility to use them. All right, friends, that's all I got for now. If you're still asking, Kayla, Little Struggles, why do you do this? To that, I'll turn to those who have ever wondered if you belong in this work or been made to feel like you don't. Keep listening. Start thinking about what it might look like for you to show up again. And don't worry, I'll help. Because I can't speak for what's happening over there, but over here, we're building a home. Not just a home where you're welcomed, a home we create together, one conversation at a time, one meeting at a time, one policy at a time. Keep tuning in as we work through understanding the immense power, opportunity, and imperfection we have before us in Cleveland right now. This is Smoke and Mirrors. I'm your host, Kayla Pincus. You can follow me on Instagram at Lil Struggles. That's Lil Struggles with a Z. See you next Wednesday.
Thank you, Kayla Pincus, for your insight on the Community Police Commission. And thank you, the listeners, for tuning in to this week's installment in the series Smoke and Mirrors. Stay tuned right here on WOVU 95.9 FM. Our voices united, mission-driven 24/7.